So you can focus on the customer as much as you like, but if you have a poor strategy, if you have a brand that's
100%.
confused about its objective, if you have a proposition that's trying to do too many things, and if no one knows about you, focusing on the customer is almost a pointless exercise.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode 7 of The Smarter Hustle. Today I'm super excited to be with my friend and absolute genius, Matt Johns from Deliberate. He's the CEO and he's one of the only guys in the world that when I sit next to him or talk to him, I feel like an absolute idiot. This guy.
I try. Thank you. Yeah.
He's really talented, and Matt, maybe you could just share a little bit about what Deliberate's about and what you do.
So, sure, and thanks very much for inviting me along, of course.
Right.
I try my best to make you feel like an idiot. That's really my core objective.
People, but you definitely take the
every time we catch up, that's my core objective, of course. Look, Deliberate is a focused customer experience consultancy. So we do everything possible to help organizations understand the experience they are currently creating for their customers, whether they realize it or not, and then we help them to identify the things that are having the greatest material impact on their ability to do business in whatever way, shape or form that is.
Amazing.
And then take them through a design thinking process to focus on building solutions and designing a better experience where it makes sense. And of course, what's very critical with the business is we want to ensure that it really aligns to the business strategy, enhancing proposition, enhancing awareness, not kind of an isolated set of customer thinking idea over in a bubble here just because it sounds good. It actually has to have a core business objective.
And align to the business goal. Okay,
absolutely.
Amazing, cool. So what does it typically look like for a business that approaches you? What does that journey look like? Where do you start? You get into a whiteboard and start throwing stuff at the wall, or is it a quite articulated process? I imagine you have a beginning point, right?
Yeah. So it's very easy to say start with the customer, and I've heard that a lot, and that's a fair assumption that you start with an understanding of the customer.
Right.
The reality is that can go all over the show very, very fast when you start just directly engaging with the customer before you've taken the time to go, okay, what is my core business objective? What am I actually trying to achieve? And is this the best thing for me to be focusing on in the first place?
Right.
And what I mean by that is that customer experience isn't a panacea for a poor proposition or weak awareness or a very an unknown or unclear brand. It can't replace those things. So if you've got those and you've got a brand that represents something, you've got a proposition that makes sense and it's considered, and you've got some pretty strong awareness in the marketplace, then customer experience almost always can be something that really adds to that and amplifies your effort, but it can't replace it.
Got it.
In terms of a business objective, we're very clear on wanting to understand, is the objective here to increase acquisition of new customers? Is it about increasing share of wallet? You know, that kind of share of wallet idea. Increasing the amount of spend, cross-selling, reducing costs.
So it all sounds like quite a commercial drive.
It's very, very commercial.
Although it's focused on the happiness of a customer.
Well, sometimes it's about the happiness, but more often than not, it's about what's right for the customer that benefits the business. So it's not just about doing things for the customer just because. It's very much about the efforts that you're putting into creating an experience, creating a business-focused outcome. So very commercial. And therefore, as we mentioned just off air before we came on, it's a core part of strategy. It should be. You don't have to be a customer experience-led organisation, but on a large number of occasions, it can be of real advantage.
I often say to people, the biggest marketing play that you can have in your business, a lot of people look for a silver bullet marketing campaign, the next best thing, or Google AdWords, social media, what should I do? And I always say the biggest thing that you can do is actually care about your customer and focus on your customer. Would you agree with that?
I think that's become a very common thing for people to say. I don't necessarily say that it's wrong. I think the best thing that an organisation can do is have a clear strategy. So you can focus on the customer as much as you like, but if you have a poor strategy, if you have a brand that's 100%. Confused about its objective, if you have a proposition that's trying to do too many things, and if no one knows about you, focusing on the customer is almost a pointless exercise, right?
It's like shooting in the dark, right?
Absolutely.
Without a clear plan.
At a certain point in time, it absolutely has a massive impact. impact. And for an organisation that's established itself, it's got that awareness in the market, now focusing on your customer and, by the way, your employee in much the same way can dramatically amplify your effort.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So what sort of businesses do you work with?
Wow, that's a big question, because it's it's funny actually, because when I work with the businesses on strategy, as you know, I work both in strategy and customer experience. I always say that focusing on your customer, knowing where you're trying to play, is one of the most important things, important decisions you need to make as a business. And yet it's interesting how many organisations have engaged us to help everything from the smallest startup to some big multinational, multi-million-dollar businesses and everything in between.
Because everyone needs that plan and strategy, right? It doesn't matter what size it is.
That's right.
It would just grow with the size of the business. But
and my expectation initially was because we are less focused on technology always being the answer. That's become again a very common recent year idea that everything customer experience means.
A SaaS product at it.
Totally. It always means it's a technology solution. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's process. Sometimes it's about training. Sometimes it's leadership. So all sorts of things. But there are a range of industries that obviously reach out. We initially thought that business to customers or direct to customer organisations were the ones that were going to want to engage us the most. But interestingly, in recent times, we've been engaged more and more by business to business organisations who recognise that there's no such thing as a business engaging with a business. It's a person within that organisation engaging with another person.
B2B. What does that
absolutely
even mean?
And so the principles of great customer experience apply in absolutely the same way for B2B as it does B2C, as it does retail.
So you talk a lot about customer experience. What are your thoughts on consistent experience?
Yeah, so consistent experience can be part of the strategy, and of course it needs to meet a business objective. Sometimes that can be useful, sometimes that can actually be part of the problem. I've worked with, a really good example is hotels. Now hotels, more often than not, particularly ones that are chains around the world, put a lot of effort into standardization and kind of repeatability of the exercise. And in my professional opinion, they're doing everything possible to make sure the customer forgets them.
So there's no tailored experience.
Because there's nothing that says that you see me as anything other than just another person who walked in the door. So because that consistent experience is exactly the same, it's actually becoming part of their problem. Which is why people rave about Airbnb and tolerate the odd terrible experience, because 99% of all the experiences are excellent. There's something interesting. There was that quirky person. They cared about them. They gave them some advice.
It's about people, right?
It's
and people talking to people, tailoring that experience. Being humans, like respecting each other. So do you think consistency though can actually play a big part when you overlap that personalized experience?
Of course. I mean, that allows you to be clear on what you're actually trying to achieve, the things that you've decided are particularly important at that point in time. You don't, I mean, by definition, you don't want to end up having an inconsistent experience just for the sake of it. That's not what I mean. But certainly on top of consistency, the things that people tell stories about is not the regularity of the experience. It's the thing that was a little different and unexpected. Unexpected, or at least met expectations in a really good way. And again, a hotel example, really simple thing that hotels just do not do is they do not ask why you're here.
Business or pleasure, or
it's so high level. I could have stayed at the hotel 3 different occasions. On one occasion, I could have been presenting at a conference the next day. On another, I could have been up for a big pitch with a big client, and on a third occasion, I could be here for a funeral. Fundamentally different reasons for being there, right?
100%. Having a different experience that you need to bring to the table.
I mean, if you've got going away for the weekend with your partner and there's a bottle of champagne there, that's great. But if you consistently put a bottle of champagne in the room when I'm there for a funeral, it's a bad idea.
It's really interesting on that point. I always ask them to take out the chocolate and the chips, because I've been notorious.
Too tempting.
Oh yeah, way too tempting. I'll just smash that back.
Cookie Monster.
But I've actually been told, that's actually going to cost you $20 to take that out of your room, and I thought that was crazy, because that's a prime example where they could actually tailor that and make that easy. But it made it harder for me to to be healthy and avoid that chocolate steak at midnight. But I just found that bizarre.
Look, something like, that as a particular example is just a great example of something that's just dumb.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just the trigger
process, right?
Trigger for a bad story. You at least got to be taking out the bad stories.
Yeah, 100%. So what's the number one thing that you see customers are infuriated about? What's the number one thing that pisses off customers that you've seen across the board?
Waiting.
Okay.
If you want to piss your customer off, make them wait.
Okay.
If you really want to piss them off,
I would agree with that.
Make them wait and don't explain why.
Sure, okay.
So if you think of airports, waiting for a plane.
Beautiful.
So it says boarding time is 10 minutes past 4.
Yeah.
It's 4:15.
Yeah.
What am I doing? It's 20 past 4. There's no announcement.
People
say, that kind of stuff.
Me off. Yeah.
Doctor's surgery. You're at the supermarket.
Yep.
And you can see a small army of staff all milling behind the tills.
Just in their own
two big lines of only 2 tills open, and you're going, why am I waiting?
Yeah.
The amount of times you can think of why am I waiting. The reason
100%.
the likes of Uber came along and were so powerful is because their objective was to understand what really frustrated people about the current experience, one of which was waiting and not knowing how long. That's why we all stare at our phones going, where's that car? In fact, even now we're like, that car's not moving fast enough.
We want it now. We want things now in today's day and age, right?
Unfortunately, we're programmed now to expect things to be instant.
And we can get things faster these days, so it's really important. I think time being the biggest asset of my life right now. I value my time more than anything. We want them now. We don't want to waste our time. And
I think maybe to answer that in a slightly wider way, I'm a firm believer that waiting is a massive issue. But I also believe that meeting expectations, or at least understanding expectations, and then meeting those expectations is probably the most critical. So failing to meet what should be relatively obvious expectations, I think, is the core of what many things that go wrong. And you could even argue waiting as part of that, right? So I'm not expecting to wait. So it's actually failing to meet expectations.
So just set the expectations up front and then over deliver. I see a lot of people promise the world and then they come here, and so that's a bad experience.
I'm a really big advocate
for over deliver, or
neither. So it's not about under-delivering or doing that. I don't think you should falsify the experience. My view is you should understand what expectations exist. Appreciate whether or not that's actually your target market first of all, before you try and meet everyone's expectations. And then meet those expectations. Simply meet them. You'll be surprised how many people will be incredibly satisfied because you've actually met their expectations.
This is what we're going to do, and then we do it. It's incredible.
Setting the bar really low and then trying to knock the lights out, it kind of sets the relationship up in a false way. And it's incredibly common for people to say they're trying that and then not deliver on that, in which case now you haven't even met your lowered expectations. So rather than falsify it,
super interesting.
My objective would be to set the expectation and then just meet it. Be very, very. That's where the consistency should come from.
100%. Got it. How did you get into all of this? Like, I know you're at Deloitte. Head of strategy, was that?
So I was acting in the chief strategy officer role for a period of time, and that was something I was really passionate about. And so whilst I was there and working with the various service line leaders across consulting, tax, audit, enterprise risk, the more and more I started kind of researching and immersing myself in strategy, which is something I'm immensely passionate about, as you already know. I started recognizing that the experience our customers, or the customers of Deloitte at that stage, were having was probably so similar to that of the 3 other big competitors, the big 4 as it's often referred to. I felt like the experience was so similar that it almost got to the point where there was no differentiation between the brands. Other than the colour of their logo, largely everything else is the same. The way that they price, the way that they engage, their time and materials, their briefing, the process, everything about it is exactly the same. The way they hire grads, the way they grads, they're all exactly the same. So you can get someone who's moving between all 4 of the big 4 and actually find it to be quite easy, going, it's actually not a lot I need to learn here because it's exactly the same. The one thing that could and should set a professional service organisation apart is the experience customers have of engaging with them. That's why I believe, so going back to the example earlier, they have clear brand awareness and awareness in terms of marketing, so everyone knows the big four, and their propositions are pretty clear. They're very, very good at what they do when they're delivering. In that example, customer experience is the bit that you should be applying to really amplify it. But I don't believe they do that very well at all. And if I was to be very, very maybe a little bit controversial, part of the reason why I ended up leaving at least that industry and really focusing on customer experience was because I felt like there was not really an appetite to do much more than maybe a little bit of a little bit of kind of piecemeal. We'll say we're going to do it, but we don't.
Is that like a case of it's not broken, so we won't touch it?
Very much so. Very much. It's quite an old model. Everyone's very comfortable. It's a high profit environment. No one's really going to change with that.
I understand. Is it weird that I'm incredibly okay with change?
Because
I've found through Firefly and the business that I'm in the digital space that people don't like change, and you have to facilitate it properly, and I can guarantee you've done a lot of that, but I am just bullishly and just completely opposed to not changing. If we don't change, I'm like, well,
that's interesting.
We need to keep moving. Like, digital marketing's moving at such a fast speed, and I feel like if we don't adapt, then we'll be left behind. So I embrace change every single day, but can that? So, what do you think about that? Am I mental, first of all?
No, a couple of thoughts on that. One, sometimes, and I'm not at all passing any judgment on what you were just saying. That's not what I mean by this. But sometimes being so keen for change can be an excuse for not making decisions.
For not knuckling down on your key strategy.
And being quite clear on the strategy.
Got that.
A strategy, though, should never, ever be static. The moment it's static, you're in a lot of trouble. But it should be relatively clear. So you should make clear decisions, make clear choices, create options, so assess what's going on, and then ultimately increase your odds of success by being clear on what you're going to do now. If you don't actually make a decision, I mean, take an analogy of any sporting game, right? If you've got lots of options in front of you, if you don't make a decision, you're in a lot of trouble. I've got to make a decision, otherwise I'm not scoring a goal or scoring a try or getting that netball shot or whatever it is. So I've actually got to make a choice. Interestingly, I know what you're getting at in terms of just that pace of change. It's quite intoxicating.
It's invigorating. It's amazing. I love it.
I did hear a little while back.
I think it's paired with learning as well, which is also a passion, like learning new things. So.
I did hear a little while back, and I don't know the science behind this, but I heard, and I thought it was quite fascinating if it is true, that our brains react in almost exactly the same way to change as it does to fear. So when we've got something that's scary, our brains react in largely the same way as a process of change. So if you, for example, said to your employee group, we're going to change everything right now, there's going to be this kind of, whoa, hang on, like almost a fear factor going on. So,
absolutely.
So the idea of embracing change is actually quite a big deal. That's quite hard.
100%.
Very hard.
I can see that. We changed our business in a 90-day time frame from becoming more of a small agency as an execution-based business and then focusing on digital strategy, moving up the food chain and applying thinking in our business and that being our core product. So not engaging unless we have the strategy or plan, because I'm a big believer in strategy dictating what you do.
That in itself is a strategic decision, right? It's about where you're going to focus in the organisation and how you're going to win in the market.
But that change was incredibly hard. I'm not going to lie. You know, it was a journey. I was constantly, communicating the change and why it was effective and why we needed to do that. And I'm a big believer that it's the future growth of Fireflies and that strategy piece. But it was challenging for people to grasp that what they were doing before now looks like this.
Do you know what? If there's something
that was super interesting for me.
If there's something I have definitely learned about strategy and to some extent with customer experience itself is that the single most intrinsically motivating thing that you can do for an employee is be explicitly clear with your strategy. Be really clear. It's remarkable how many organisations I've worked with, either in a strategy sense, or if I start talking about customer experience, I want to know about this strategy because the customer experience needs to align to strategy. I regularly get some very wishy-washy responses.
It's exactly the same in digital strategy. Who are your personas or customers that we're targeting? B2B. Well, where do they live? What are their pain points? What keeps them up at night? And I'd say it's the same reversed for a strategy, right? You need to be very clear and
you need to be very clear, and there's a model, Roger Martin, who's a very, very smart man from Canada, created a model that I've used. I think he calls it the playing to win model. I tend to refer to it as a cascading choices model. It's the same thing.
Right.
But there are kind of 5 integrated questions that reinforce one another, and they all need to be answered to have great strategy. Right. What is your winning aspiration? What are you actually trying to achieve? Where are you going to play explicitly on the playing field? Like what game are you actually even playing? Who are we targeting? You know, where in the value chain, etc. How are we going to win? So specifically, what are we going to do
what does
incredibly better than our competition? Yeah, exactly. What are the things that's going to set us apart? Where we just said we were going to play to achieve what we want to achieve. And only then should we be considering what capabilities we need to be able to do that.
Yes.
Not before.
Yeah,
like it's only that point. And then lastly, what management systems need to be put in place to bring all that together and make sure your strategy moves and is measured.
And measurement.
Very, very, it's a deceptively simple model, incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful.
I bet. And so you'll take people and businesses of all shapes and sizes through that model.
Through that process, It's pretty challenging because I mean, I often hear when I'm looking at strategy within organisations, I often hear, I mean, I've said this a few times in presentations I've done, that the 3 kinds of strategies I often see is, one, a whole bunch of financial objectives. Just our strategy is to make $40 million. That's
really
not
inspiring.
a strategy. That's not even a strategy, that's an outcome. So that's not how you're going to do it. So that's nuts. And then I see often a whole bunch of internal facing targets. So we want to grow by 10% relative to yourself. So if everyone else grows at a faster rate than that, or figures out how to, if your competition do things differently, and you're satisfied with growing at this 10%, that's you're almost confusing yourself. You're in a competitive situation.
You need to look at the competitive market space.
Compete. Don't just look at yourself.
Totally.
But the most popular one, the one that I love hearing the most, and I hear this all the time, is broad sweeping statements of bullshit. Broad sweeping statements of absolute bullshit. It's just gobbledygook language. It's where the marketing department,
be a world leader.
The marketing department gets involved far too early. They introduce a whole bunch of pretty sentences, smiling people on PowerPoint presentations, shining light through the window, and magically we've got strategy. That's not strategy. Strategy is about making choices, being really clear, creating options, being clear on what you're actually trying to achieve, understanding your strategic problems, creating options to overcome them, making some sensible, tested, robustly tested options to get through it, and then making decisions, and then you can get into it.
Nice.
If you ever hear anybody, you must have heard this, what's more important, strategy or execution? The answer is it's exactly the same thing. You've got to do that before you do that. You can't just do one and not the other.
A lot of people go either one or the other, or they're too invested in strategy and they've got a game plan, and then they go and make a sandwich and they do nothing, or they're all in execution, they're playing in the wrong game. They're supposed to be playing soccer and they're playing netball. Whatever it is.
I've heard many executives say, look, it's all about execution. It's not if you haven't got a strategy. If you haven't made decisions, 100%. What are you executing?
Okay, love this. We agree with a lot of things. I knew this would be great. So I'm going to get this right. I know you're an intelligence operative back in the day. You were an intelligence operative. In the police.
So I was a cop. I was in the Navy for a wee while when I left school, so awesome. my journey, I havenly gone anywhere near university. So,
you did not study?
Which is interestingly one of the things that I have, so I have studied since, but interestingly one of the things that have been to my advantage is that I've been forced to learn things different ways. And it put me in positions that I've learned things in unusual circumstances. So I was in the Navy for a few years, I had some fun things. I went to Antarctica, as you know, so I got posted there, which was an amazing opportunity. Some good stories there.
Maybe for another day.
I decided to travel when I was about 21, and I was actually born in the UK, but I was raised in New Zealand, so I had a British passport, and I decided to go travelling, take advantage of my British passport, and I met somebody in the southwest of England, which is where I was originally from, where I was trying to meet some friends and family that I didn't really know, and they suggested that if I was interested in joining the police, which they knew I was back in New Zealand, by the way, New Zealand told me then I was too young. At that stage you had to be 25 or older. That was 98. and so suggested that if I was interested, the Devon and Cornwall Police, which is where I ended up joining, were recruiting for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, right, awesome.
And so I ended up joining. I really enjoyed it. I really immersed myself in it. I got into intelligence quite a bit. I got into all sorts of things, informant handling and surveillance and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, really cool stuff. The stuff you see on the movies.
Yeah, I didn't. Don't ask me anything about traffic law because I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
is that like when you pull the short straw? You're the traffic cop.
Oh no, it's actually an elite. It's an elite thing now. So it's not. It's not back in the day.
Right, sorry if anyone's watching.
That's something that people try really hard to get into.
They drive Lamborghinis over in Europe, so it can't be that bad.
But no, one of the things I ended up being invited to participate in was something called test purchasing.
Okay.
Test purchasing is a form of undercover work. It's not deep undercover like in the movies, but it's the official way of kind of summing it up is putting someone in a position of vulnerability where they test for the availability of a commodity. In other words, I go to a particular location, I look pretty disheveled, I look like a likely guy who might be a user of heroin or cocaine, and then I wait until somebody comes to me and offers to sell something. And that's basically.
So you can't go to them.
Absolutely not. No. So you are in a position of vulnerability. Otherwise, there are all sorts of case law that says you can't walk in.
Okay, interesting.
And of course, you'd get invited to go to another police force, never in your own backyard. And you put yourself in a position, and eventually they deal, and you do it a few times. Then eventually you wear a wire, and you get all the information, etc., etc. And then you disappear. That's it. So you write up all your statements, and you have nothing to do with what happens next. Then they arrest who they want to arrest. Nothing to do with you. So cool. Very, very cool. And I learned a lot from that experience. In particular, training was far more interesting than anything else. Training was amazing. Just because everything went wrong on purpose in training. Just to see how you dealt with
the
it.
limits.
Absolutely. But also
mentally and physically.
Absolutely. We were very, very tired.
Fitness game as well as part of that role.
So in the test purchasing work, not so much. That was very much about mental fatigue. Although we were tired on purpose, they made us tired. They made us make mistakes. And because they wanted to show how easy it is to trip up. So, but you learn a lot about how people behave, what motivates people, how people are thinking, appreciating that what you're thinking is more important than what you're saying. So, and you can imagine how often someone might say something, but you realise later that they meant something else. Well, by definition, what they were thinking was more important than what came out of their mouth. So, which is something I place a lot of stock in now with customer experience. Which is why I'm not a big believer in surveys at all. I find them quite distracting from reality.
The 360 surveys.
Yes, they are quite. The Net Promoter Score, for example, I find. It's become an industry, but it's not really reality, unfortunately. Just because it says a 9 or a 10 and it says I'm an advocate, it doesn't mean you're actually advocating for the brand. In which case, that doesn't make sense, right? That's just a red herring.
Do you think it has a place in terms of it identifies the 3, 4, 5, so you can actually, investigate that?
Maybe,
but a far better way of doing it.
I believe. It's in terms of an intervention at that point in time.
It's good for picking up.
That's not necessarily
bad. Cases,
unfortunately, it's usually the only effort to really understand a customer.
Which is sad.
And that's the role. We are at Deliberate. We really advocate for a qualitative understanding of customers to really get to know them. You asked earlier, where do you start? And I mentioned about the customer's not necessarily the point. Strategy is where you should start, the business objective, and then we typically start with a set of hypothesis about what we believe is the current state. So, and we have a really cool, quite a fun workshop that we use in many circumstances called Know, Think and Suspect. So we want to figure out what we know about the experience and we've got evidence for. You can see the police stuff coming out, right? So we have evidence and it's corroborated. Versus
this is perfect.
Versus
see the journey.
Versus things that we think is going on because I've heard something. I've got some anecdotal evidence, but it's not really corroborated. So you can imagine the first would be beyond all reasonable doubt, and then this would be on the balance of probabilities, right? So no one's going to jail, but it's probably true. Versus things that we suspect is going on. So where our gut's telling us something's happening. I've got no evidence evidence for this, but look, if I was to take a punt, you'd be surprised how often that's right.
The gut's usually right. Like, I'm a big fan of that, you know.
It's incredible. Well, there's a lot of science behind it.
There's a lot of science behind
it. And what's critical, though, of course, is that we go away and we test some of that hypothesis before we start making decisions. We engage with customers to assess whether or not those are true and to try and find out a little bit more, so we dig a lot deeper. The value of qualitative research is that I can say, what did you mean by that? Or tell me more. You just can't do that in a survey in a meaningful way. It just doesn't work.
How do you facilitate those conversations with customers? Is it quite a delicate process?
Yeah, it's
do you just pick up the phone and
oh no, so never over the phone. So it's almost always face to face because again, very policey stuff. I'm very interested in body language, hesitation, where you're looking, are you leaning back. Pardon me?
It needs to be mediated by someone outside the business.
No,
the business owner, founder, GM can drive this sort of conversation.
I tend to find in my professional experience having somebody independent engaging with the customer yields a far greater outcome. Doing it yourself, you as a business owner or a general manager or whoever, the two things. One, you've got a lot of things conflicting in your mind. You're hearing sometimes what you want to hear. You potentially don't want to scratch that one too much because I don't really want to go down that road.
You're conflicted.
Absolutely, you are conflicted. And of course, they're just not professional interviewers. It's not what they do. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And you know, my job is to really get under the surface and understand more about it.
Amazing.
We know at Deliberate that if we've done a really good job, you'll provide me answers to questions I haven't asked.
Sure.
So I won't ask you about leadership. I won't say, tell me about leadership or tell me about communication, but I'll get you to eventually get there yourself and then start talking about it, and I'll ask you a little bit more about tell me more.
Jedi mind tricks.
It's totally Jedi mind tricks. So there's a little button that you press if they don't say what you want.
I love it.
It's good fun too. It's really good.
So I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Have you seen a Smarter Hustle episode before?
No, I have not yet. That's actually pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing these. So
the usual framework for the episode is the audience asks a bunch of questions, and we get to answer them.
Cool.
However, because you're a good mate of mine, I thought I wanted to start it a little bit differently today and ask you 5 questions that you're going to answer quick fire. Is that all right?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Now they're pretty interesting, and I've really come up with some interesting
curly ones. Go on.
So we're going to go 10 seconds for each answer.
Sure.
I don't want you to overthink it. Just hit me straight away, all right? Let's go. What would constitute a perfect day for you? Go.
A perfect day for me, it would be about spending time with people that I really love.
Amazing.
So whether it be friends, family, that's really important to me. Whatever I'm doing, as well as just genuinely interesting people, right? And I get to do that all the time, which is what I love about my job.
That's why that's lights you up. I understand. Okay, second question. This one's a bit of a tricky question, so you're gonna have to listen up. If you were able to live to the age of 90 and retain either the mind or body of a 30-year-old for the last 60 years of your life, which would you want?
The body.
Body or mind?
Body, definitely. I don't want the mind of a 30-year-old.
Just be at the beach,
Jeez,
6-pack.
It'll be like you. I'll take the body, you can leave the brain behind. I don't want to know what I know at 90 with the body of a 30-year-old. It's a no-brainer.
Love it.
No-brainer.
Confident. Love it. All right. If you could wake up tomorrow having gained any one quality or ability, and you can go as far as superhero shit if you want, what would it be?
Do you know the first thing that came to mind was humility? I know that sounds nuts, but
humble. Love it.
Yeah, rather than the superpower, it's much. Everyone wants to fly. I'd love to fly.
Yeah, that was my one.
But it's humility and being really conscious of the things that are most important.
Amazing.
It's something that I have to keep reminding myself to be. I'm not a naturally humble person.
Sure.
And it's something
that's awesome that you
but the fact that I'm aware of it is probably a critical thing. So it's,
you're a step ahead of a lot of people. That's super cool. Great answer. Fourth question.
And invisibility, because that would be cool.
Invisibility. Right? There it is. Fly or invisibility? Choose one.
Fly.
Definitely. Okay. Definitely. Fourth question. What is the greatest accomplishment of your life?
Other than 2 daughters.
Amazing.
So obviously I've got 2 amazing daughters, both incredibly beautiful, smart young women, and I can't wait to see what they do with their lives. So that's obviously, putting that to one side, because I'm sure that's not really the question. Most interesting thing I've accomplished is actually managing to move between various careers and not giving up what I had achieved in the previous part of my life. So I've managed to really scaffold on top of things over time.
Taking the lessons, put them into the next one.
Yeah, I'd like to think I've done that quite deliberately. But part of that's just been good fortune. Yeah, sort of done that, a little bit of deliberate. So I mean, I've taken lessons from the military. I've taken good and bad. I've kind of used that when I was in the police. Then I used that when I was in corporate roles. I used that when I was in senior management at an investment business, and then of course I've used all of that when I was at Deloitte. I think, to be honest, I think everyone does that anyway. But I guess I'm just conscious I've bounced between some quite ridiculously different industries, right?
But they seem to have just perfectly kind of come in full circle and apply it and being able to take the learnings and knowledge from there. I mean, I'm looking at your career progression and it makes so much sense where you're at right now to be able to provide strategy.
It initially sounds nuts, but the more I think about it, the more it makes absolute sense. I didn't design any of that. There's some. I mean, I'd like to credit myself for opening doors, not necessarily for what happened next. But again, that's something I've told my daughters. You're always opening and closing doors. So be aware that that's happening all the time. So to make that your advantage. That's sometimes it comes off, sometimes it doesn't. But if you think that the only thing going on is what you can see in front of you, you're missing the point.
I believe in that 100%. Last question. Your house containing everything you own catches fire. So after saving your loved ones and your pets, you have to safely make a final dash and save one item. What would it be and why?
Oh, what would I dash into? Well, look, it's actually a really hard question other than photographs because it's funny, photographs are those things that you don't value until you're looking at them, right? And then you're going like, wow, these really spark.
But you've got the cloud, so you've probably got some photos saved.
Yeah, maybe,
so you're safe there.
But I love looking at the old photos.
Okay, the old printout.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy some things, but I'm not a particularly materialistic person.
Sure.
So nothing like my favourite thing comes to mind.
Okay.
I've got a couple of mementos, things that I had from the police and the Navy, which I'd maybe want to grab.
Nice.
But I think most importantly, it would be probably photos of my family.
Photos of your family,
because you can't. I mean, we remember everything, we just can't recall it all, right? And photos are an incredibly cool way of triggering a memory or a thought or a whole story in your mind, and I'd hate to think that I'd lost that.
100%. Yeah. And if the whiskey cabinet was close, would you grab a bottle of whiskey as
well?
I would. So
I'm from West Auckland, but
love it. Thanks a lot. That was great. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience. So we had Emma ask a question. What's the biggest thing that they can start doing in their business to improve their relationship with their customers? If you could boil it down to one thing.
Stop sending them emails and asking them to fill out surveys. Stop. Because it is just, there's massive survey fatigue that is real and present, and it's just getting bigger. McDonald's now asks you what their Big Mac was like, and the answer is, gee, exactly the same as it was 20 years ago. What an incredibly annoying... And if you're doing that, absolutely don't incentivize people to do it either, because you get a false reading. If you really want to improve your relationship with your customers, engage them qualitatively to discover and learn, and not to sell them anything. Don't try and sell them anything. Which is part of the problem when you send an executive out sometimes, because they're like, 100%. Can we do something? And no. I just want to understand and learn, engage, have conversations, share ideas, get customers involved in the process. You'll be remarkable how much you learn. But just stop thinking that everything has to be electronic in this engagement.
So take away the commercial gain and take away the NPS automatic email.
It's really superficial stuff, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks for that. Awesome. Ian Shaw from Firefly, he asks, how do you account for changes in your own business to make sure that change doesn't affect the consistency that you've been working on of customer experience? So I guess he's trying to say, if you've created a consistent experience and you've worked on the customer experience, but then you change your business, how do you ensure that change doesn't follow through to your customer in a negative way? Because there's always going to be a level of uncertainty with change, right? You don't know what you don't know. So
it's a little bit of so with any process of change. A really good example of this, maybe a good example, but when organisations restructure.
Yep.
Again, in my professional opinion and experience, and this might sound a little controversial, but I believe that the majority of times when a restructure takes place, it's because the senior leaders in the organisation have run out of ideas. It's not actually because it's what needs to happen, it's because they're just trying to make it look like we're going to make a decision.
Okay, wow.
That gets really, really difficult to manage that change process, because all of the reasons for it were genuine or a little bit clouded and confused. If you've got really clear, smart reasons for why you've made a change, if it's part of the customer proposition, for example, then if you have done your work properly and you've engaged with customers and you've sought to understand them, you've potentially co-designed ideas, you've got them involved in the process, rather than just did a survey and then I draw a conclusion from the survey, so I'm going to make this change, that's going to be a really hard sell for the customer. They're going to go, well, hang on, that doesn't make any sense. That's not what I meant. So if you know you've done the work properly, so the way you make that happen is and ensure a good outcome is by doing the hard work up front, really understanding your customer, not feeling like you have to quickly just jump to a conclusion, and definitely use a bit of time to consider the ideas. I'm a really big believer in deliberately separating the decision-making process from the gathering information, and quite separately. It's one of those things like if I said to you, should we go do that? You'll think, If I say, I'm going to ask you again on next Friday, then you'd be going, I've given it some thought. Exactly, give it some thought.
Totally.
And then of course, if you've made those decisions to put that effort in, it's all about how genuine you are communicating with your customer about what you're doing. Don't let them assume things. Assumptions are the mother of all things that go wrong.
When I was young.
And don't end up being a politician with it, right? So telling a customer what they want. There's nothing worse as a customer than some business telling me what I want when I never spoke to them. How do you possibly know?
Super interesting. I wish you told me that advice when I was getting my tattoo. Laser tattoo removal does not feel good,
that's brilliant. I could have done that tattoo half the price.
It was pretty cheap, I tell you.
West Auckland styles.
$60.
Straight over.
Thank you so much, man. It was amazing to have you on the show. So thank you so much for coming to Firefly.
Brilliant. Anytime.
We'll get you on again sometime soon. Great to see you.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you. Cheers. Thank you.